The second week of August, and the air in the house sits on you like a wet wool blanket. You wake up already tired. The ceiling fan does nothing but push the heat around. You walk past the thermostat, look at it, and walk away, because you already know what running the AC all day costs, and last month's electric bill is still sitting on the counter reminding you. So you just sit there and sweat. You close the blinds to keep the sun out. You drink another glass of ice water and tell yourself it is not that bad. People have been doing that for years now, paying $40, $60, $80 more on their electric bill every summer month just to stay comfortable in their own home, and the whole time the answer was sitting in their freezer. Just two simple plastic bottles, a fan they already own, and there is absolutely nothing else. Now, I know how that sounds. I know your first instinct is to shake your head and say you have tried fans and they do not work. Stay with me on this, because what most setups get wrong is not the fan. It is the one piece they leave out. It is the simple cold surface. The moving air needs something to pull against, and once you give it that, the whole thing changes. I am going to show you exactly what to do and why it works, and I am going to be honest with you about what it will not do, because that matters just as much. People have been cooling their homes with moving air and cold mass since long before electricity was something you paid for by the month. The knowledge did not go anywhere. It just stopped being passed down, and that is exactly what I am here for. Folks call me Annie Hemingway. I spent the better part of my life on an Appalachian homestead up in the Blue Ridge, where summer heat comes in hard and stays. We had no central air in our home. We had no window units for most of my childhood. What we had was shade, cross ventilation, cold creek water, and a springhouse dug into the hillside that stayed cool even in July, and the women in our hollow knew how to use every one of those things to keep a home livable through the worst of it. 50-some summers of managing heat without a power bill to show for it is where this comes from. This knowledge did not come from a book. It did not come from a YouTube channel. The doing of it year after year. What I share here is that kind of knowledge, the kind that used to pass from mother to daughter across the kitchen table, and somewhere along the way got replaced by a store selling you something that plugs into the wall. If that sounds like the kind of thing worth holding on to, go ahead and subscribe. There are folks who have been watching for a good while now, and they will tell you every method here is something you can actually use with what you already have. Now tell me something in the comments. What do you do right now when the heat gets bad and you do not want to run the AC? Do you have a trick your family passed down, or are you just suffering through it like most folks are? I read every single comment, and I mean that. The two-bottle method works because of a principle that does not need a complicated name. Moving air pulls heat away from your skin. That is the basic reason any fan feels cooling at all. But plain room temperature air only has so much pulling power. The moment you give that moving air a cold surface to pass across on its way to you, something shifts. The air drops in temperature before it reaches you. No, the temperature won't drop by 30 degrees. Not like an air conditioner, but enough. Enough that your body stops fighting the heat and starts resting in it instead. What you want are two standard plastic bottles, the kind that come with water or sports drinks, the 20-ounce or 32-ounce size. Fill them nearly full, leave just a little room at the top for the water to expand, cap them tight, and lay them flat in your freezer the night before. Frozen completely solid by morning. That is your cold mass. Set your fan on a table or a nightstand at about the height of your face when you are sitting or lying down. Stand the two frozen bottles up directly in front of the fan, one on each side of the base, or propped against the front so the airflow passes right over them and across them on its way to you. The air moving over that cold surface picks up the chill and carries it forward. You are sitting maybe 3 to 5 feet away. Within 10 minutes, you will feel a difference that plain fan air does not give you. That is the whole setup. There is absolutely no cost, and there is no installation. There is absolutely nothing to buy. The bottles you already have, the fan you already have, the freezer you already have, and the principle behind it is the same one our grandmothers used in every cool room they ever kept. Here is what nobody explains when they tell you a fan does not cool the air, and they are right that it does not technically. A fan does not lower the temperature of a room. What it does is move air across your skin fast enough that your body's own cooling system can actually do its job. This happens as your skin begins to sweat. The moving air carries that moisture away, and in doing so, it carries heat away with it. That is why a fan feels cooling even when the air it is pushing is the same temperature as the rest of the room. The problem is that on a genuinely hot August day, when the air inside your house has been sitting and building since morning, even that mechanism starts to lose ground. The air is too warm, too still at its core, and your body is working so hard to push heat out that the fan cannot keep up with it. You are still sweating and the heat feels relentless. The air is still moving, but unfortunately, you are not comfortable. You are just slightly less miserable than you would be without the fan at all. That is the gap the ice bottles fill. When frozen solid, each bottle holds what you could call a cold core, a dense mass of ice that does not melt fast the way a bowl of loose ice cubes does. A bowl of ice in a room melts within an hour or two, puts moisture into the air, and the cooling effect drops off quickly. A sealed frozen bottle melts from the outside in, keeping the surface cold. The surface stays cold for 2, sometimes 3 hours depending on the heat of your room. The water inside takes a long time to give up its cold because ice releases its chill slowly. That process of absorbing heat is exactly what does the work for you. So when your fan pushes air across those bottles, the air is not just moving, it is giving up some of its heat to the ice before it reaches you. The bottles are pulling warmth out of the air the same way they pull warmth out of the room. What arrives at your face is air that started out warm and lost some of that warmth on the way to you. 3 to 5 degrees of difference in moving air is something your body notices immediately, even if a thermometer takes longer to register it. This is why a wet cloth draped over a fan does the same thing in a slightly different way. The evaporation of the moisture cools the air passing through it. The bottle method works on the same principle but lasts longer and stays cleaner. And best of all, there is absolutely no dripping to worry about. No mildew on a damp cloth left sitting. No re-wetting every half hour. You set the bottles, you sit down, and they do their work. Now let me walk you through the setup exactly because the details matter more than people realize. Start the night before. This ensures your bottles are frozen solid by morning. Take 2 plastic bottles, any size from 20 ounces up to 32 ounces works well. Larger than that and they take too long to freeze all the way through and may not be solid by morning. Fill each one to about 3/4 full. Just remember you must not fill them to the very top. Water expands when it freezes, and a bottle filled completely will crack or warp the cap, and then you have a mess in your freezer and a bottle that leaks all over your fan. 3/4 full, capped tight, laid on their sides in the freezer. Leave them overnight. A minimum of 6 to 8 hours for a bottle that size to freeze solid to the center. In the morning, take them out and let them sit on a folded kitchen towel for about 2 minutes. They will immediately start to sweat on the outside. That is condensation, and it means they are working. The towel just catches the first drips before you carry them to wherever you have set up your fan. You do not need to dry them off or wrap them in anything, just put them in place. The sweating surface is actually part of what makes them effective, because that thin layer of cold water on the outside is another surface the passing air can pull heat from. Set your fan. A box fan works best, but a standard oscillating fan turned to face one direction works fine too, on a surface at roughly face height for where you will be sitting or lying. Do not put it on the floor pointing up at you. The air needs to travel horizontally from the bottles to your body, not at an angle that sends most of it above your head. Place one bottle on each side of the fan's front base, pressed up close so they sit right at the edge of the airflow, or if your fan has a flat front grill, lean them against it so the air pushes past them immediately as it leaves the fan. The goal is to give the air almost no distance to travel between the cold surface and the moving column of air that is heading toward you. Every inch of distance between the bottle and the fan is a little bit of cold lost to the room before the air picks it up. Sit or lie down 3 to 5 feet from the fan. Any closer and the air hits you before it has fully passed the bottles. Any farther, and the cooled air has time to mix back into the warm room air and lose what the bottles gave it. 3 feet is the sweet spot for most rooms and most fan sizes, close enough to feel the effect, far enough that it reaches you as a column rather than a blast. Turn the fan to medium. High speed on a hot day moves air so fast that it does not stay in contact with the cold bottles long enough to pick up much chill. Medium speed is the right balance between contact time and how quickly the air reaches you. Low is too slow on a day above 90 degrees, and you will not feel the difference. The last thing to know about the setup is the direction your fan is facing relative to your windows. If you run the fan pulling air from a slightly cooler part of the house, a north-facing room, a shaded hallway, a basement stairwell, the base temperature of the air the fan is working with is already a few degrees lower, and the bottles have less work to do. The cooler the air the fan starts with, the more effective the whole system becomes. The rotation is what turns a one-time setup into something that actually carries you through a full hot day. 2 bottles gives you a working pair and nothing more. When the first set melts, and depending on your room temperature, that will be somewhere between 2 and 3 hours, you have warm water in a plastic bottle and a fan blowing room air at you. The fix is simple and costs nothing extra. Fill 4 bottles instead of 2. Freeze all 4 overnight to ensure you have a constant rotation. Run the first pair through their 2 to 3 hour cycle, then swap them for the second frozen pair and put the first pair back in the freezer. In the time the second pair does their work, the first pair has had long enough to freeze solid again. You cycle back and forth all day without ever running out of cold. Label the bottles with a small piece of masking tape if you have more than one set going. Nothing fancy, just a mark so you know which ones went into the freezer first and are therefore most solidly frozen. Pull from the longest frozen pair every time. That small habit keeps the system running smooth from morning until the evening air cools down enough that the fan alone does the job again. The conditions that make this work best are worth knowing plainly, because this method has a real range and a real ceiling, and understanding that keeps you from setting it up wrong and deciding it does not work when the problem was just the room. Dry air and this method get along very well. In the drier states, the Southwest, the mountain regions, anywhere the summer heat is what people call a dry heat, evaporative cooling of any kind works better because the air has more capacity to absorb moisture and carry heat away. You will feel the effect of the bottles more strongly on a dry day than a humid one. Humid air is significantly harder for this method to overcome because the air is already saturated. When the air is already heavy with moisture, the way it gets in the southeast or the Midwest in July and August, the air has less room to absorb more evaporation, and the cooling effect of the bottles is reduced. This does not mean the method stops working. It means the effect is smaller. On a humid 95-degree day, the bottles will not feel like an air conditioner. Instead, they will feel like much-needed relief from the heat. There is a difference, and it matters. Room size matters too. Small spaces are much easier to cool. A small bedroom, 10 feet by 12 feet, the size of most single bedrooms, is exactly where this method shines. The fan is close, the air is contained, and the column of cooled air reaches you before it has a chance to mix and warm up. A large open living room is harder for this method to handle. The cooled air disperses too quickly, and unless you can close off the space and work with a smaller volume of air, you will struggle to feel the effect across the room. Close interior doors, close the blinds on any windows that face south or west and are taking direct afternoon sun, and work with the smallest livable space you can. Now I want to be straight with you because saying so matters more to me than sounding impressive about a method made of frozen water and a box fan. This is not an air conditioner. It does not cool a room the way a window unit does. It does not pull heat out of the air and cycle it outside. It creates a column of cooler moving air in a specific direction toward you, and it makes the person sitting in that column more comfortable. The room temperature itself may drop a degree or two over time as the ice absorbs heat from the surrounding air, but that is a side effect, not the main event. The main event is you, in that chair in that column of air, not swearing at the ceiling fan anymore. If you live somewhere with weeks of humidity above 80% and temperatures above 100 degrees, this method alone will not be enough on the worst days. But even in those cases, it will definitely help you stay cool. It will give you hours of real relief. But I would rather tell you its limits plainly than have you find out on the hottest day of the year that a frozen bottle can only do so much. What it does do, on the great majority of hot days most American homes face, the kind where the temperature inside climbs to 85 or 88 degrees and stays there, is make that completely bearable. The difference between sitting in still 88-degree air and sitting in a moving column of air that has passed over ice is not small. Your body feels it within minutes. You stop tensing against the heat. You can sleep through the hot summer nights. You can work in a cool environment. You can sit with the windows open in the evening and feel the difference when the outdoor air finally starts to cool. Now, scale this across your day in your house the way the old homesteaders scaled every cooling method they knew. Morning is your best window of opportunity. Before 10 o'clock, the outdoor air is still cooler than the air trapped inside your house from the previous day's heat. Open every window on the shaded side of the house, the north and east sides, and let that cool morning air push through. Run your fan without the bottles during this window, pulling cool air in from outside. You are pre-cooling the house, filling it with lower temperature air before the sun gets high. The women in our hollow did this every summer morning, windows thrown open at dawn, moving through the house to push air through from the cool side. They called it airing out. It is as old as houses. Shut the house back up by 10 or 10:30 before the outdoor temperature climbs past the indoor temperature. Close the blinds on the south and west sides. Now you are holding the cool air you let in. The house works like a cooler, insulated, sealed, keeping what cold you gave it earlier in the morning. Your frozen bottles and your fan take over from there, working with air that started the day lower than it would have if you had left the house closed overnight. Evening, usually after 7 or 8 o'clock, depending on your region and the time of year, the outdoor air will drop back below indoor temperature. That is your second window. Open the house again to let the cool air in. Cross-ventilate. Windows open on opposite sides of the house so air moves through rather than just pooling in one room. The fan can now pull cooler outside air across the room. If your bottles are still cold, run them through their last cycle of the day. That rhythm, open at dawn, close at 10, sealed through the heat of the day with bottles and a fan, open again at evening, is how you manage a hot house without paying for the privilege. The springhouse on our old homestead worked on the same principle. It stayed cold because it was built into the hillside, insulated from the heat above, with water moving through to pull warmth away. The bottles are the water. The fan is the movement. Your sealed-up house is the hillside. The principle is exactly the same, just sitting in your bedroom instead of dug into a creek bank. The electric company does not lose any sleep over your comfort. That is not a criticism. It is just the plain shape of how things work. They sell electricity, and the more of it you use to stay cool, the better that is for their side of the ledger. A window unit running through a southern summer can add $60, $80, sometimes over $100 to a monthly electric bill. Central air in a larger home costs more than that. And every summer the bill comes in, people look at it, wince, pay it, and go back to setting the thermostat a degree lower because it is too hot to think clearly about alternatives. Nobody is hiding the bottle method from you. Nobody sat in a boardroom and decided to suppress frozen water. It is simpler than that, and in some ways more frustrating. The cheap methods just never had anyone with money behind them to teach them. There is no product to sell. There is no subscription, no filter to replace, no annual service contract. 2 bottles and a fan that you already own, and the knowledge of how to use them together. That kind of fix does not show up in advertising because advertising needs something to sell, and this has nothing to sell. The knowledge that used to carry people through hard summers without a power bill was not written down anywhere. It lived in the way a grandmother opened her windows at first light and shut them before the heat could follow her inside. It lived in the position of shade trees planted on the west side of a farmhouse. Not by accident, not for looks, but because the women who planted them knew which direction the afternoon sun came from and what it did to an unshielded wall. It lived in the root cellar, the springhouse, the back porch with its cross breeze, the wet cloth hung across a window frame to cool the air coming through. Every one of those things worked on the same principle as two frozen bottles in front of a fan. Moving air is the key here. The cold surface pulls heat away, heat drawn away before it reaches you. The physics has not changed. Only the knowing of it has gotten thin. My mother learned to manage summer heat the way she learned everything else about keeping a home, by watching her own mother do it and doing it alongside her until it became second nature. We slept on the back porch some nights when the house held too much heat from the day. Not because we had no choice, though we did not have much of one, but because my grandmother understood that the porch caught the night air off the ridge, and that the ridge air, coming down through the trees, was always several degrees cooler than what sat in the valley below us. She knew where the cool air was, and she put herself in it. She did not wait for something to fix the heat. She moved toward what was already working. There was one summer, I was young, maybe 9 or 10 years old, when the heat came early and stayed. My grandmother took 2 mason jars, filled them with cold well water, and set them on the windowsill with a damp cloth laid across them so the air coming through the screen passed over the cold jars and the wet cloth both before it reached us sleeping on the floor of that back room. It is not so different from what I have been describing. The cold mass is essential for this. Moving air is already what happens. The cloth added evaporation to cool things down. We slept fine throughout the night. She never called it anything. It was just what you did. That is what I want you to carry away from all of this. Not just the bottles and the fan, but the way of thinking behind it. Cool air is already around you, in the early morning, in the evening, in the shade on the north side of your house. Cold mass is already in your freezer. Moving air is already what your fan does. The method is just knowing how to put those 3 things together and when. So here is what I want you to do. Tonight, fill 4 plastic bottles 3/4 of the way full and put them in the freezer. Tomorrow morning, throw open the windows on the shaded side of your house at first light and let the cool morning air through for an hour or 2. Shut everything back up around 10 o'clock and close the blinds on the south and west sides. Pull 2 bottles from the freezer, set them in front of your fan at face height, sit 3 to 5 feet back, and run the fan on medium. Swap bottles every 2 to 3 hours. Open the house again in the evening when the outside air drops back below what is inside. Do that for 1 week and tell me whether your electric bill looks different at the end of the month. That is the whole method. There is absolutely no cost involved. There is nothing for you to buy. Bottles you already have, a fan you already own, and windows you have probably been keeping closed because nobody told you when to open them. If this is the kind of practical knowledge you want more of, the old ways that actually work, the things that used to be common sense before common sense got replaced by a store shelf, then subscribe and stay a while. There is a good deal more where this came from, and none of it is going to cost you much more than what is already sitting in your kitchen. Drop a comment and tell me, did you try this last summer or something like it? And what is the worst room in your house for heat? The one that just will not cool down no matter what you do. I read every comment that comes in, and I learned something from most of them. The next thing worth knowing, and it follows naturally from everything said here, is how to keep your house cooler all day without touching the thermostat using window placement, shade, and airflow in a way that most people set up backwards. That is coming next, and if summer heat is something you fight every year, you will want to hear it. Your grandmother knew how to read a house the way some people read the weather. Which walls held heat, which windows caught the breeze, which hours of the day were worth using, and which ones to wait out. That knowledge kept homes livable for generations before anyone sold a machine to do it instead. You have it back now. Now go and put it to work.